Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I am John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Good topic, let's do it. What's the scariest paranormal activity you've ever experienced? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. My wife, girlfriend at the time, was sleeping over at my house. I was dealing with a bit of insomnia at the time, so I was lying awake in the middle of the night when I heard something fall from my computer desk. For whatever reason, it scared me enough to hide under my blanket. Then all of a sudden, I hear your typical horror movie heavy breathing right in front of my face outside my blanket. I'm pretty much frozen in fear, listening to this breathing noise circling the bed, sort of. My wife starts to toss a little bit, and then rips her blanket off to get up to use the bathroom. She shuffles towards the end of the bed to get down, and the next thing I know, she screams with so much terror, then instantly starts to cry, saying there's a little girl sitting on the floor at the edge of our bed. My next move was I stood up on the bed and jumped off probably as far as I can make it toward the light switch. I asked what the hell she was, and she just described seeing a girl in the fetal position, looking fairly distressed, look up at her when she was getting out of bed. I told her that I heard breathing outside my blanket right before she saw it, so needless to say, that light stayed on the rest of the night. My sister used to have some weird shit happening at a unit she rented many years ago. She told me stories, but I never experienced it myself. One time while visiting her, that changed. We were watching TV, and I went to the kitchen to get a drink. I walked past the bathroom door, which was open. When I came back, it was closed. She hadn't left the sofa, and there was a dodgy tile on the bathroom floor where the door would get stuck. You would have to physically force the door over to the tile. No wind, no noise, nothing. That's weird, I thought, but okay. 10 minutes later, we're both sitting there, and we hear this incredibly loud bang, bang, bang on the door that goes to the backyard. Scared the living F out of us and made us jump. We looked outside, but couldn't see anything or anyone. No dog either. That seemed to be it for the evening, thank F. And after talking about it for a while, she went off to bed. I watched TV for a bit more and then decided to call it a day as well. I turned off the TV and stood up. As I'm about to walk away, I hear this noise of something heavy being dragged over wood. I look up, and she has this big dolphin statue on top of her TV cabinet. The statue is just slowly moving forwards across the wood by itself. It went about 10 centimeters or so and just stopped. You could see scratches on the wood where it moved. I told her about it the next morning, and she wasn't surprised. The events in the house are the only time in my life I've ever experienced paranormal stuff in person and have no rational explanation to this day. My next door neighbor growing up was a friend of mine, and we had a kind of hangout spot in the patch of woods that ran behind our houses. We were about 14 and were experimenting with cigarettes, so that's where we went to hide. We were out there one day towards sunset and heard her grandmother calling to us. We panicked and put our cigarettes out so we wouldn't get caught, and as she called our names again, her voice sounded closer this time. That's when we realized that A, her grandmother lived at least 3 hours away, and to our knowledge was not expected for a visit, and B, the voice was coming from deeper into the woods, not from our backyards. We freaked and dashed out of the woods to the safety of our yards, and as we ran, we heard her call out one last time, but her voice sounded different this time, kind of deeper and angry sounding. We did not enter those woods ever again unless it was broad daylight, but we never heard anything like that again. Scariest experience of my life. Lived in a 100-plus-year-old mansion that had been divided into apartments. Roommate and I lived on the top floor with attic access and a private entrance in the back of the house. One evening, I was watching a movie with my boyfriend when my roommate texts and says he's bringing a date home. Is it okay if they use the big TV? I say sure, and boyfriend and I moved to the bedroom to finish our movie. Shortly after, we heard heavy footsteps come up the back stairs, open and close the very noisy and squeaky kitchen door, and hear them walk across the kitchen, past my door and down the hall. We finish watching our movie and boyfriend goes home. It's shortly thereafter I realized that I am the only person in the apartment. Called roommate to see if he'd been home, and he says, no, we just got to Blockbuster. We're going to choose a movie and head home. I called my boyfriend and told him I was spending the night at his house. First, a bit of background. When my wife was young, her parents and siblings lived with one set of her grandparents. Her grandfather was murdered in the home. It happened in his bedroom upstairs. The room was used primarily as storage for the next 20 plus years. Her parents tried to sell the house multiple times, but living in a small town, everyone knew, and the house would not sell, so they stayed. Years later, and while my wife and I were engaged, there was a murder trial which I attended in support of her family. I saw the crime scene photos, important later. Another few years later, we had 2 kids. The oldest was 6 at the time. My wife's family does not talk about the murder, and our kids do not know about the murder to this day. My father-in-law decided he wanted the room where the murder happened to be a hangout for the grandkids when the family was in town. He put sleeping bags and a TV in the room ahead of a holiday, days-long get-together. We didn't like it, but stayed silent. The murder was a sore subject. My father-in-law also wanted all the grandkids to all sleep in there together. We were the first to arrive, and my son went into the room alone. He usually couldn't sit still long at that age. So after a couple of hours, I decided to check in on him. Here's our conversation. During the whole conversation, he was still and rigid and would not look away from the TV. Hey buddy, is everything okay up there? Yeah. Okay, have fun. Daddy, do I have to sleep in here? I don't want to. Why not? I'm not alone. Every hair in my body stood up. Well, yeah, I'm here with you. No, there's someone in here with us. Are they nice, mean, a grown-up, a kid, a grown-up? What are they doing right now? They're watching you. You've never said anything like this at your grandparents' house before, and you had been here a lot. They don't leave this room, and I've never been in here before. Where are they now? Without looking away from the TV, he points to the far corner where his great-grandfather was murdered and said, They're standing over there. They don't move much. Okay, buddy, you don't have to stay in here. And he left the room with me. Everyone was in the living room one night when all of a sudden the hairdryer in the bathroom turned on. I may have been about 11 at the time. I went to investigate, and as soon as I turned the corner into the bathroom, I saw the hairdryer drop from a spot a bit higher and away from the counter, like it had been floating and turned off. That was a strange one. Also, around the same time, our cat, in the middle of the night, was screaming and clawing at the air. Scared me and my sister so bad. We crawled in bed with my mom, who I could tell was also a bit freaked out. Not sure how paranormal you'd consider this, but about a year ago, we moved to a new house in a rural area. Woods, open fields, and cows for the most part. Not long after we moved in, I was out in the yard with my German Shepherd, who has since passed, rest in peace Teddy, getting him to do his business before bed. It would have been about 8 or 9 p.m., and winter, so it was dark out, maybe mid to low 40s temperature-wise. It was a clear night as far as rain or snow goes, and there was no ice. I was standing in the yard just enjoying the peace and quiet when I heard wind chimes coming from the side of my house. I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up, and I called my dog and hurried back inside. The creepy part of it, we don't own wind chimes. Never heard it again, and I don't know what it could have been. I sometimes see lights driving down the vacant wooded roads that look like headlights crossing the street from a crossroad. But when I approached the spot, there is no crossroad, just woods. Or headlights coming towards me that disappear as they dip down a hill, but when I crest it and approach, they're just gone with no turnoffs around. Weird things in the woods. Where I live, there are so few untouched places of nature left. Civilization just keeps crawling further and further and taking away those unspoiled natural places. I think things that once were spread out are now forced into smaller areas of woods. I don't think they're happy about it either. Lived in an apartment with 2 roommates. All kinds of stuff happened, but the scariest was hearing my roommate scream at the top of his lungs one morning, rushing into his room to see him paler than I've ever seen her. He said that he woke up and saw a little girl at the end of his bed. He thought he might be dreaming, so he looked around, pinched himself, and said for sure he was awake. Looked back, and the girl was still there. So he worked up the courage to say, "Who are you?" He said the little girl looked at him, and then started screaming at him, and then disappeared. He wouldn't sleep in that room for a month after that incident, and would alternate in between our bedrooms, and you know what? We didn't give him any shit about it. When I was about 13, my 10-year-old brother threw a cricket bat at me, which missed and made a hole in my bedroom wall. Inside the wall, we found a load of gray hair bound into a bundle with a nylon stocking, which was pretty odd. I used to play music in my room, and often the sound would go down of its own accord. One night I kept turning it back up, and there was a huge whoosh of wind, a loud tutting sound, and my tape player flew off the table. I think it was the ghost of an old lady who hated Duran Duran. Playing hide and seek with my sister in our house. It was pretty dark, and I went into my parents' room and looked in the built-in wardrobe. Could hear breathing, and I reached in and something touched my arm. I shouted, "Found you," and my sister from downstairs shouted, "No, you haven't." I ran screaming downstairs and told my mum, who went up to look, and nothing was there. Same house, I saw a face in the mirror, and when in the basement I heard footsteps in the house when nobody was in. That's a creepy little story. A little bit of Narnia mixed in there as well, so pretty cool. Yeah. How come whenever we have these wild experiences, most of the time we're alone? Stinks. So this happened to a neighbor of mine growing up. They had a ton of spooky this happens, but this was the worst. She was home alone early 2000s, so was on MSN AOL chatting on her house phone in the basement with every single light on. After signing out of her computer, she went upstairs where she received a phone call on her landline. It was her grandmother, who started berating her, asking who was in the house with her. Confused, she continually stated that no one was home with her. Her bio dad was banned from the house at the time, and her nan insisted she wouldn't be in trouble if she just told her who was there. At this point, she's thinking her nan is just trying to scare her, when her nan says, "Well, I just got a phone call from your caller ID saying, 'Bring home light bulbs.'" After hearing this, she grabs a bat, calls her mom and stepdad to come home, and barricades herself in her bedroom. When they got home and did a once-over of the house to clear it, they went down to the basement, and every single light bulb was dead. Mine involved a chemical leak which caused an altered cognitive state and short-term memory issues. Me and my sister were in our grandparents' house, and we had forgotten they were still alive. Yeah, you read that right. My granddad was at work, and my grandmom was pale white walking around the house. We called our parents 4 times. First time, we were scared, and our parents legit thought we were just wanting to come home because we hated it at our grandparents' house. The 4th time we called, we made no sense, and it actually scared our mom. We told her some random lady was in a memes room, and that she was putting on her lipstick, talking about her first date with our granddad that night. What happened was a less than scrupulous company in the 90s got in trouble for dumping toxic chemicals. A small amount had leaked out into the water table. So, we were in my Mima's house, scared out of our minds because we were thinking they had died. They were very much alive and would not die for another 20 years. My grandmom was pasty white due to the effects her body had. By the time our parents arrived, me and my sister were outside in the driveway, scared because we didn't know who each other was. No clue what happened to the company that dumped the chemicals. I was a kid when this happened, and my parents don't really know. They were never the kind to sue for damages. A friend of mine killed herself my sophomore year at uni. I went to a real hippie-ass school, and some of my friends knew she was going to do it, and instead of talking her out of it, went to visit her and said goodbye. Nobody told me she was even that bad or that any of that shit had happened until after it was all said and done. So anyway, the school ended up having a vigil for her, and I couldn't make it work. Sucked to have to miss it, so when I got off shift and came back to campus, I grabbed 2 beers and went out to the bench where they had held the service. I cracked them both and poured one out for her. Just kinda stood there for a minute and soaked it all in and then left. As I was walking back into the dorms, the light in the parking lot turned off. Whack as F, and I was like, damn, what are the odds of that? So as I kept walking, then all the lights on the path back to the dorms turned off too. Then I was really spooked. When I got back to my dorm, the light above our patio was flickering. Weirdest shit I've ever seen in my life. Never believed in ghosts or the great beyond, but I've never been able to rationalize that besides pure coincidence. Odd stuff. My first experience with death was at age 10 with my amazing aunt who helped raise me. I had etched in my mind how terrible she looked in the casket. Fast forward at age 19, I got off work, went grocery shopping around midnight. I looked down to the end of the aisle and someone was very slowly pushing a cart full of cans of Bush's butter beans, the same type my aunt used to make me in an amazing casserole. I was fixated on the cart and then saw my aunt pushing it, angelic and dressed in white about 30 feet away. She turned my way smiling, and from behind I heard her voice whisper, "I'm okay now, and I love you." I ran out of the store and was freaked out for years, but that was only the beginning of many other experiences over the years that defied logic. I now consider myself fortunate with the ability to connect with others that have transitioned this life. Jeff. I know what you're going to say, but hear me out. I was reading The Shining at about 2 o'clock in the morning and went in the kitchen for a snack. I was eating a piece of leftover chicken and my head was still thinking about the book. Now imagine a stack of paper dinner napkins in a square basket, and that basket is sitting on top of a Lazy Susan. I was eating the chicken and staring at the basket and I thought, wouldn't it be freaky if that started to turn? And after several seconds, the Lazy Susan started moving and getting faster and faster. It was whirring so fast that the napkins went flying. My eyes got as big as saucers and I pretty much flew to jump in bed with my boyfriend. I don't even think my feet touched the ground. I told him the whole story and he was skeptical. When we went in the kitchen, we saw the napkins were strewn everywhere. Yeah, it was 2 a.m. and yeah, I was reading Stephen King, but seriously, how did the napkins get all over the floor then? I got two. First one happened to me and the second one happened to my dad, and go. First one, we were in Bosnia, which, for those who don't know, can have some seriously rural parts. We were driving through the mountains to get to the capital where the airport was so we could get home. I am a very spiritual person and have a great deal of respect for areas where tragedies happened. Bosnia is a country with a lot of tragedy in the last few decades, so I'm always respectful there, especially to whichever restless souls may be in the forest or fields. Anyways, we're driving and I see something in the middle of the road. I couldn't for the life of me figure out what it was. It looked like an animal, but there was something really off about it. One moment, it's there, and the next it disappears. Now every time we drive down that part of the road, I look to see if that thing I saw would ever return. Second story. My deceased uncle Tim was super into Ouija boards as a teen. My dad's family are super religious, so I'm surprised he was able to get away with this. One day he's playing with the board, and he sees something in the corner of the room. It was big, completely black, and had huge horns. The only colorful thing on it were its red eyes. It scared the shit out of my poor uncle, and he put the board away, but never officially said goodbye. My uncle told my dad what had happened, and he thought it was just his big brother trying to scare him. Though, when my dad did tell me this story, he did note the creature had a description of something from a holy book. From that night on, my dad would have horrible nightmares if he ever slept in that house. They only stopped when he moved out for college. My uncle was sadly killed a few years into my dad's college, and so was my aunt. Personally, I believe both of their deaths had something to do with the creature. Time skipped to many years later, when I'm like 8 or 9. This was around the time I was getting my own room, and my dad wanted to get a mattress. Since at the time we weren't that rich, he wanted to get it used. My other uncle, who lives in their childhood home, offered to give my dad the mattress their deceased brother used. Thing is, mine didn't know this was his dead brother's mattress. My uncle didn't tell him this. He brings it to our place, and our dog is sitting outside in front of the garage. My dad starts unhooking the mattress from the top of the car, and my poor dog freaks out. She stands up and just runs into the garage. My dad brushes it off as our dog being anxious. She had a very bad experience with her previous owners, which left her a little bit traumatized. He starts bringing the mattress into the garage, and the poor dog is cowering in the corner and barking at it. This dog never barks. I think this was the first time my dad ever heard her bark. My dad decides to bring the mattress back to my uncle's place. He was incredibly pissed. He asks his brother which room the mattress is from, and my uncle says it's Tim's mattress. Father Dearest, being the person he is, put it back in the room and does a quick look around. He swears he saw that thing my uncle bought in with the Ouija board. We rarely visit that house now. My uncle had to move out due to health issues, and it's basically abandoned. But whenever I go near that room, I feel I'm not alone.